The sound of coins clinking onto the weathered saloon table was the worst sound Clara Sutton had ever heard in her 19 years of life, because those silver pieces represented the price her own father had just placed on her freedom. She stood frozen near the bar's entrance in Silver Reef, Utah, her worn calico dress hanging loose on her thin frame, watching as her father counted out the money with shaking, liquor-stained fingers, while a stranger in buckskin sat across from him with an expression carved from stone. $40, her father wheezed, his bloodshot eyes darting between the coins and the mountain man who sat motionless as granite. That settles my debt to you, and you get her. She can cook and clean, and she won't give you no trouble. Clara felt bile rise in her throat. She had known her father was a gambling drunk, had watched him lose their small farm piece by piece over the past 2 years since her mother died of fever, but she never imagined he would sink this low. The other patrons in the saloon had gone quiet, watching the transaction with a mixture of disgust and morbid curiosity. This was 1876, and while the world was supposed to be getting more civilized, here in the Utah Territory, the law still bent for men with money and ignored the desperate altogether. The mountain man finally moved, his large, calloused hand sweeping the coins back toward her father with a gesture of dismissal. "Keep your money, Sutton. I will not buy a human being." Clara's father lurched forward, his face reddening. "Now wait just a minute. You said I owed you $40 for that horse you sold me, and I am offering fair payment. The horse was worth $40. Your daughter is not property to be traded." The mountain man's voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together, but there was something steady in it that made Clara's racing heart slow just a fraction. He stood then, and she realized how massive he truly was. He had to be well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to stretch the seams of his buckskin shirt. His hair was dark brown and fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and his face was weathered and tanned from years under the mountain sun. His arms, visible where his sleeves were rolled up, were corded with muscle that spoke of a life spent surviving in harsh wilderness. "Then I will find another way to pay you," her father said desperately. "Just give me more time. Time I have given you plenty of." The mountain man's dark eyes, the color of strong coffee, finally shifted to Clara, and she felt pinned by that gaze. There was intelligence there and something else she could not quite name. "Miss, do you have anywhere else to go? Any family?" She swallowed hard, her voice coming out smaller than she wanted. "No, sir. My mother passed 2 years back. I have no siblings. There is no one." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already suspected. Then he turned back to her father. "Here is what will happen, Sutton. I am taking your daughter away from here. I will consider your debt paid, but not because I am buying her, because no woman should be in your care when you value her at the same price as a horse. You cannot just take her." Her father sputtered, but there was no real fight in him. He was already eyeing the door, probably calculating how quickly he could get to another saloon once this confrontation ended. "I can, and I am." The mountain man pulled out a leather pouch from his belt and counted out $20, placing them firmly on the table. "This is for her, for the clothes on her back and whatever belongings she might have. I am not paying you for her. I am paying her for having to endure you as a father." The logic was twisted, but Clara understood what he was doing. He was giving her father money in a way that would satisfy the debts and the witnesses, while making it clear she was not being purchased. The distinction might seem small to some, but to Clara it meant everything. Her father grabbed the money quickly, and the mountain man turned to her. "Gather whatever you need, miss. We leave in 10 minutes. Clara's mind reeled. She should have been terrified. This man was a stranger, clearly dangerous, and she was about to ride off into the Utah wilderness with him. But when she looked back at her father, already heading toward the bar to order whiskey with his new coins, she knew anything was better than staying. She nodded mutely and hurried out of the saloon. She had precious little to collect. In the boarding house room her father had been renting, she stuffed her few belongings into a canvas sack. 2 other dresses, both as worn as the one she wore, her mother's Bible, a hairbrush, and a small tin containing her mother's wedding ring. Everything she owned in the world fit in a bag she could carry with one hand. When she returned to the saloon, the mountain man was waiting outside with 2 horses. One was a massive bay gelding that suited his size, and the other was a smaller paint mare with kind eyes. He took her bag without a word and secured it to the paint's saddle. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes, sir. Not well, but I can stay on." He helped her mount, his hands respectful and careful, never lingering. Once she was settled, He swung onto his own horse with an ease that spoke of countless hours in the saddle. Without another word, he guided his horse out of Silver Reef, and Clara followed, not daring to look back at the only town she had ever known. They rode in silence as the sun climbed higher in the May sky. The landscape around them was a study in contrasts. Red rock formations jutted up from scrubland dotted with sage and juniper. The air was dry and growing warm, but not yet the brutal heat that would come with full summer. Clara's mind churned with questions, but fear kept her quiet. What did this man expect from her? Where were they going? What would happen when they stopped for the night? After what must have been 2 hours, he finally slowed his horse and turned to check on her. "We will stop soon to water the horses and rest. There is a spring another mile ahead." "Yes, sir," she managed. His jaw tightened slightly. "My name is Kane Ashford. You can call me Kane. I am not your master, and you do not owe me anything. I want that understood right now." Clara blinked, confused. "But my father's debt is not yours, and I consider it settled, since I will not be doing business with him again." Kane's expression was hard, but she was beginning to realize it was not directed at her. "You are free to go your own way whenever you choose. I am heading up into the mountains where I have a cabin. It is a 2-day ride from here. You are welcome to come with me until you figure out what you want to do, or I can take you to a different town where you might find work and a place to stay. Your choice." She stared at him, trying to understand. Men did not do things without expecting something in return. Her father had taught her that lesson thoroughly. "Why are you helping me?" Kane was quiet for a long moment, his eyes scanning the horizon as if looking for something. Finally, he said, "Because someone should have helped my sister when she needed it, and no one did. She died alone and afraid, sold by our stepfather to a man who worked her to death in a mining camp. I was only 14, too young and too weak to stop it. I swore then that if I ever had the chance to help someone in a similar position, I would. So here we are." The raw honesty in his voice struck Clara like a physical blow. This was not a man trying to manipulate her or gain her trust through false kindness. This was a man carrying old pain and trying to make something right in the only way he knew how. She felt tears prick her eyes, but blinked them back. "I am sorry about your sister." He nodded once, a sharp jerk of his head, and then urged his horse forward. They continued on to the spring, where he helped her dismount and tended to both horses with practiced efficiency. He showed her where to refill her canteen and offered her some dried meat and hardtack from his saddlebags. They sat on opposite sides of a flat rock, eating in silence, and Clara tried to process the impossible turn her life had taken. "I do not have anywhere else to go," she finally admitted. "I have no money, no skills beyond keeping house. If you are willing to let me come to your cabin, I would like to. I can earn my keep cooking and cleaning. I am a hard worker." Kane looked at her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "You do not have to earn anything, but if working makes you feel better, I would not turn down decent meals. I am a poor cook at best. We can try this arrangement for a while, and if it does not suit either of us, we can reassess." "Fair?" "Fair," Clara agreed, though she still did not quite believe this was real. They rode through the afternoon, the landscape becoming more rugged as they climbed in elevation. Kane pointed out landmarks and explained the terrain with the ease of someone who knew every rock and tree. He told her about the wildlife to watch for, the plants that were safe to eat, and the best water sources. He talked to her like a teacher might talk to a student, patient and thorough, and Clara found herself relaxing slightly in his presence. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the red rocks in shades of orange and gold, Kane found a suitable place to camp for the night. It was a small clearing protected by a natural rock overhang, with a fire ring that showed others had camped here before. He unpacked the horses with quick, efficient movements, then set about building a fire. "I can do that," Clara offered, wanting to be useful. He glanced at her and nodded, stepping back. "All right, I will see to the horses." Clara knelt by the fire ring and arranged the kindling the way her mother had taught her years ago. Within minutes, she had a small, steady fire going, and she added larger pieces of wood to build it up. By the time Kane returned, she had water heating in a pot he had provided and was mixing flour and water to make simple pan bread. "You do know your way around a camp," he observed, settling onto a flat rock near the fire. "My mother taught me. Before my father took to drinking so heavy, we used to camp sometimes when we traveled to visit her family. The memory was bittersweet. Those had been happier times, before loss and addiction had torn her family apart. They ate together as darkness fell over the Utah wilderness. The night sounds of crickets and distant coyotes filled the air, and the stars overhead were so bright and numerous that Clara felt dizzy looking up at them. She had never been this far from town before, and the vastness of the wilderness was both terrifying and beautiful. Kane laid out bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, maintaining a respectful distance. "You take the spot closer to the rock face," he instructed. "It will provide more shelter if the wind picks up. I am a light sleeper, so do not worry about anything approaching camp. I will hear it." Clara nodded and settled onto the bedroll, which was surprisingly comfortable. She wrapped herself in the blanket he had provided, inhaling the scent of pine and smoke and leather. She should have been terrified, alone in the wilderness with a strange man, but instead, she felt safer than she had in months. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was the steady, competent way Kane handled everything, but her eyes grew heavy almost immediately. "Clara." Kane's voice came from across the fire, low and serious. "Yes, I meant what I said. You owe me nothing. Not your labor, not your company. Nothing. I want you to remember that. What your father did was wrong, and you are not bound by his debts or his choices. You understand?" She swallowed hard, emotions welling up that she had been pushing down all day. "I understand. Thank you, Kane. Sleep well." She closed her eyes and, against all odds, did exactly that. The next day of travel was much like the first, except Clara felt more comfortable asking questions. Kane answered them all with patience, explaining his life in the mountains, how he trapped fur in the winter and hunted meat to trade with towns in the summer. He told her about his cabin, built with his own hands 5 years ago after he had finally saved enough from his trapping to buy the land from the territorial government. "It is not fancy," he warned. "One large room with a sleeping loft. Stone fireplace, a decent well nearby. I have been meaning to build an addition, but it never seemed worth the effort when it was just me." "It sounds wonderful," Clara said honestly. Anything with 4 solid walls and a roof sounded like paradise compared to the uncertain future she had been facing. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the air grew cooler and the vegetation changed. Ponderosa pines towered overhead, and the undergrowth was lush with ferns and wildflowers. A stream burbled nearby, and Kane explained that it ran past his property, providing fresh water year-round. The beauty of it all took Clara's breath away. They arrived at Kane's cabin in the late afternoon of the second day. It was exactly as he had described, a solid, well-built structure of logs and stone, nestled in a clearing surrounded by pine trees. Smoke curled from the chimney would not be there since no one was home, but the building looked well-maintained and sturdy. A small barn stood nearby, and Clara could see a chicken coop and a vegetable garden that needed weeding. Kane helped her down from her horse, and she stood looking at the cabin, feeling an odd sense of arriving home even though she had never been here before. "It is perfect," she said softly. Something flickered across Kane's face, an expression she could not quite read, but he simply nodded and began unloading the horses. "Come on, I will show you around." The interior of the cabin was dim and cool after the bright sunlight outside. The main room contained a large stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with benches, a few shelves holding supplies, and a comfortable-looking chair near the hearth. A ladder led up to the sleeping loft. Everything was neat and organized, if a bit dusty from Kane's absence. "I will sleep down here," Kane said, pointing to the chair. "You can have the loft. There is a good mattress up there, stuffed with pine needles and grass, more comfortable than it sounds." Clara climbed the ladder to investigate and found he was right. The loft was cozy, with a thick mattress, several blankets, and a small window that looked out over the clearing. It was the nicest sleeping space she had had in years. "This is too much," she called down. "You should keep your bed. I can sleep by the fire." "The loft is yours," Kane said firmly. "I am used to sleeping rough. That chair is luxury compared to most places I have rested." She climbed back down, feeling overwhelmed by his continued generosity. "Kane, I need to understand. What do you want from me? There has to be something." He had been stoking the fire back to life, but stopped and turned to face her fully. In the dim light of the cabin, he looked even more imposing, but his expression was open and honest. "I want you to feel safe. That is all. I know what it is like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of people who should protect you but instead hurt you. If I can give you a place to figure out your life without fear, then that is what I want to do. If you want to help around the cabin and garden, I would be grateful. If you want to leave tomorrow, I will take you wherever you want to go. But I do not want anything from you that you are not freely willing to give." Clara felt something break open inside her chest. Some tight, scared thing that had been coiled there for so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, and she covered her face with her hands, embarrassed by the sudden show of emotion. She heard Kane move, but he did not touch her. "It is all right," he said quietly. "You have been through something terrible. You are allowed to feel it." She cried then, really cried, for the first time since her mother died. She cried for the father she had lost to drink, for the childhood that had been stolen, for the fear and humiliation of being sold like livestock. And Kane just stood there, a steady presence, letting her release the poison that had been building inside her. When she finally got control of herself, wiping her face with her sleeve, she felt lighter. "I am sorry," she said. "Do not be. You needed that." He moved to the shelves and pulled down a clean cloth, handing it to her. "I am going to finish tending the horses and check my traps. Take your time settling in. There is a pump outside for washing. Supper is whatever you can find in the stores, or I can cook something when I get back." "I will make supper," Clara said, needing something to do with her hands, some way to start repaying his kindness even if he claimed she owed him nothing. He nodded and left, giving her space to compose herself. Clara explored the cabin more thoroughly, finding sacks of flour and cornmeal, jars of preserved vegetables, smoked meat hanging from the rafters, and even a few precious eggs in a basket near the door. She set about making a proper meal: biscuits, fried salt pork, and stewed vegetables. As she worked, she felt herself beginning to relax in a way she had not in years. When Kane returned as the sun was setting, the cabin smelled of food and wood smoke. He paused in the doorway, something soft crossing his hard features. "Smells like a real home. Well, it is a real home now," Clara said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Sit down. Everything is ready." They ate together at the table, and Kane praised the food with genuine appreciation. "I have been eating mostly jerky and hardtack for weeks. This is better than anything I could get in town." "It is simple fare," Clara protested, but she was pleased. Simple does not mean bad. Some of the best things in life are simple. He met her eyes across the table. "How are you feeling? Truly?" Clara considered the question carefully. "Like my life just changed completely. Scared, relieved, confused, grateful, all of it at once. That seems reasonable, given the circumstances." Kane finished his meal and leaned back. "I meant to ask, but did not want to pry. Can you read and write?" "Yes, my mother taught me. She was educated back east before she married my father and came out here." "Good. I have some books if you want something to do during the day. Not many, but a few. And if you want to learn other skills, trapping or hunting or such, I can teach you those too. Might be useful to know how to take care of yourself." The offer surprised her. Most men would never think to teach a woman such things. "I would like that. To learn, I mean. Then we will start soon. First, you should rest and get your strength back. You are too thin. No offense, but your father was not feeding you properly." Clara could not argue with that. The past year had been lean, with most of the food money going toward her father's drinking. "I will try to put on weight, especially if I am eating cooking like this every day." A small smile tugged at the corner of Kane's mouth, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look younger and less severe. "I think we will both benefit from your cooking." They fell into an easy routine over the following weeks. Clara woke each morning to find Kane already up, usually outside tending to the animals or working on some project. She would make breakfast and they would eat together. Then he would head out to check his trap lines or hunt, while she tended the cabin, weeded the garden, and took care of the chickens. In the afternoons, when he returned, he began teaching her wilderness skills. He showed her how to identify animal tracks, how to move quietly through the forest, how to fish in the stream with a line and hook. He taught her to shoot his rifle, standing behind her to help her brace against the kick, his presence warm and solid at her back. He was patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise when she succeeded. And Clara found herself looking forward to these lessons more than anything else in her day. She was also acutely aware of Kane himself in ways that made her blush when she thought about them at night in the loft. He was unlike any man she had ever known. Strong, yes, with muscles that showed clearly when he worked without his shirt in the summer heat, chopping wood or repairing the barn. But it was more than his physical strength. He was competent and steady, always knowing exactly what to do in any situation. He was kind without being soft, protective without being controlling. And when he looked at her with those dark, intelligent eyes, she felt seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. Clara knew she was developing feelings for him, feelings that went far beyond gratitude. But she had no idea if he felt anything similar, and she was terrified of ruining the peaceful life they had built by making her attraction known. One evening in late June, after they had finished supper and were sitting outside watching the stars emerge, Kane said, "You have been here a month now. Are you happy with this arrangement? Do you want to stay? Or would you like me to take you to a town where you might find other opportunities?" Clara's heart to get rid of her. Had she done something wrong? "Do you want me to leave?" "No," he said quickly, then seemed to catch himself. "I mean, you are welcome to stay as long as you like. I just want to make sure you are not staying out of obligation. You have choices, Clara." She turned to look at him in the fading light. His profile was sharp and strong, backlit by the last rays of the sun. "I am staying because I want to. This is the first time in my life I have felt truly safe. The first time I have felt like I matter. You did that, Kane. You gave me that. So, yes, I want to stay, if you will have me." He turned to meet her gaze, and something intense flashed in his eyes. "I will have you as long as you want to be here. I want you to know that He trailed off, jaw working like he was chewing on words he could not quite spit out. "What?" Clara asked softly, leaning closer. "I have come to care about you, more than I should, probably. More than a man who took you out of a bad situation should care. I do not want you to feel pressured, and I do not want to take advantage of you being here. But I need you to know that having you here has changed things for me. This cabin feels like a home now. I look forward to coming back each day, and it is because of you." Clara's breath caught. "Kane, I care about you too, so much that it scares me sometimes. But it is not because I feel obligated or because I have nowhere else to go. It is because you are a good man. The best man I have ever known. You are strong and kind and patient, and you make me feel like I could be something more than I ever thought possible." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one large, calloused hand. "Clara, I want to court you properly. I want to do this right, not because I bought you, because I did not. Not because you owe me, because you do not. But because I am falling in love with you, and I want to know if maybe you could feel the same way about me." "I already do," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, gentle despite his size and strength. The kiss was sweet and careful, full of promise and restrained passion. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Clara felt like she was glowing from the inside out. "I have never felt like this before," Kane admitted, his forehead resting against hers. "I have never wanted anyone in my life the way I want you in mine, but I want to do this right. I want to give you time to be sure." "I am sure," Clara said, but she understood what he meant. This was all so new, so intense. They needed time to build trust, to court properly, to make sure what they felt was real and lasting. "But I appreciate that you want to take things slow. It shows respect, and I value that." They sat together under the stars, hands linked, talking about everything and nothing. Kane told her more about his childhood, about his mother dying when he was young, and his father remarrying a cruel woman who sold his sister. He told her about striking out on his own at 16, learning to trap and hunt, building a life in these mountains where no one could hurt him or take anything from him. And Clara told him about her mother, about the good times before the drinking, about her dreams of maybe having a family someday with a man who would be a real partner, not a tyrant or a drunk. As the summer deepened, their courtship blossomed. Kane brought her wildflowers from the mountains, taught her to ride better so they could explore together, and told her stories by the fire at night. Clara mended his clothes, cooked his favorite meals when she could figure out what they were, and learned to read the weather and the land the way he did. They kissed often, sweet stolen moments that left them both wanting more but respecting the boundaries they had set. One morning in August, Clara woke to find Kane had already left for his trap lines but had left a note on the table. It read simply, "Ride out to the meadow past the East Ridge. Follow the stream. Come find me." Her heart racing with curiosity, she quickly dressed, packed some food and water, and saddled her paint mare. The ride took about an hour, following the burbling stream through pine forest until it opened into a high mountain meadow filled with wildflowers. And there was Kane, standing in the middle of it all, holding something in his hands. As she rode closer, she saw it was a bouquet of the most beautiful wildflowers she had ever seen. Purple lupines, red Indian paintbrush, yellow columbines, all tied together with a leather cord. She dismounted and walked to him, tears already prickling her eyes because she knew what was coming. "Kane?" He dropped to one knee in the wildflowers, this massive, strong man humbling himself before her. "Clara Sutton, I know we have not known each other long. Only a few months. but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your laugh, the way you hum when you cook, the way you never give up even when something is hard. I love who I am when I am with you. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you happy and keeping you safe?" "Yes," Clara said, the word coming out on a sob. "Yes, of course, yes." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around in the meadow, while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he kissed her deeply, and Clara felt the world fall away until there was only Kane and the flowers and the endless blue sky. "I do not have a proper ring yet," he said apologetically. "I will get one when we go to town to find a preacher, but I wanted to ask you here in this place because it is the most beautiful place I know, and you deserve beautiful things." "I do not need a ring, I just need you." She kissed him again, pouring all her love and gratitude and hope into it. They rode back to the cabin together, planning their future. They would go to Silver Reef in a week to arrange for a wedding. Kane wanted to do it properly, to announce their intentions and get married in front of witnesses so no one could ever question the legitimacy of their union. He wanted Clara protected in every possible way, legally and socially. A week passed in a blur of preparation. Clara made herself a new dress from fabric Kane had stored away, originally bought for trading but gladly given to her for this purpose. It was not fancy, just simple blue cotton, but she embroidered the collar and cuffs with white thread in a delicate pattern her mother had taught her. Kane cleaned up his one good suit, which he had not worn in years, and even trimmed his hair and beard, though Clara insisted he leave it mostly long because she loved running her fingers through it. The ride back to Silver Reef was bittersweet for Clara. She had not been back since the day Kane had taken her away, and she was nervous about seeing her father again. But Kane seemed to sense her anxiety and rode close, his presence a constant reassurance. They arrived in town on a Saturday morning, and people stared as they rode down the main street together. Clara sat tall in her saddle, refusing to show shame or fear. She was here as Kane's intended, not as some woman of ill repute, and anyone who thought otherwise could answer to her soon-to-be husband. They found the circuit preacher at the small church on the edge of town, a kindly older man named Reverend Matthews, who remembered Kane from previous visits. When Kane explained their situation, carefully editing out the more sordid details of how they met, the Reverend smiled and agreed to perform the ceremony the following morning, Sunday, after regular services. "It will be nice to have a wedding to celebrate," Reverend Matthews said. "And Miss Sutton, you will need witnesses. Do you have anyone in town who might stand up for you?" Clara's mind raced. She had no friends here, no family she would want present. But then she remembered Mrs. Chen, who ran the general store and had always been kind to her when she came in to buy supplies for her father. "Perhaps Mrs. Chen from the mercantile? An excellent choice. I will ask her myself. And Kane, I assume you will find your own witness?" "Yes, sir. Tom Brennan from the livery owes me a favor. He will stand up for me." They spent the rest of the day making arrangements and purchasing a few supplies. Kane bought Clara a simple gold band from the jeweler, nothing fancy but solid and real. He slipped it on her finger to check the size, and the weight of it felt perfect, felt right. As they were leaving the jeweler's shop, they nearly ran into Clara's father stumbling out of a saloon. He stopped short, his bleary eyes taking in Clara's new dress, her healthy appearance, the way Kane stood protectively at her side. "Well, look at you," he slurred, "all fattened up and fancy. I suppose you think you are too good for your old father now." Clara felt Kane tense beside her, but she put a hand on his arm. This was her demon to face. "I do not think I am too good for anyone, father. I just think I deserve better than being sold for drinking money. Kane and I are getting married tomorrow. You are not invited." Her father's face reddened. "You ungrateful little, that is enough." Kane's voice was low and dangerous. "You will not speak to her that way. You lost the right to call yourself her father the day you tried to sell her. If I see you approach her again, if I hear you have spoken ill of her to anyone, I will make sure every person in this territory knows what you did. Do you understand me?" Her father, coward that he was, backed down immediately, mumbling something incoherent before shuffling back into the saloon. Clara let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Are you all right?" Kane asked gently. "I am. Thank you for standing up for me, but also for letting me say what I needed to say. You are stronger than you know, Clara. You do not need me to fight your battles, but I will always be beside you when you face them." That night they stayed in separate rooms at the boarding house, maintaining propriety even though Clara longed to be near Kane. But tomorrow they would be married, and then they would never have to be apart again. The wedding ceremony was simple but beautiful. Mrs. Chen had spread the word, and several townspeople showed up to witness the union, curious about the mountain man and the girl he was marrying. Clara stood before Reverend Matthews in her blue dress, Kane beside her in his clean suit, and spoke vows that came straight from her heart. I, Clara, take you, Kane, to be my husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. Kane's vows were equally heartfelt, his deep voice steady and sure. I, Kane, take you, Clara, to be my wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do us part. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Kane kissed her in front of everyone, a declaration of love and commitment that left no doubt in anyone's mind that this was a real marriage, born of genuine affection. They celebrated with a small dinner at the boarding house, hosted by Mrs. Chen, who had taken a liking to Clara. Then, as the sun began to set, they rode out of Silver Reef as Mr. and Mrs. Ashford, leaving the town and its painful memories behind. The ride back to the cabin in the fading light felt magical. Clara was intensely aware of the ring on her finger, of Kane riding beside her, of the fact that they were truly married now. When they finally arrived home and Kane helped her down from her horse, she felt suddenly shy. Kane seemed to sense her nervousness. "We do not have to do anything you are not ready for," he said quietly. "We have all the time in the world." "I am ready," Clara said, and she was. She loved this man, trusted him completely. "I want this. I want you." He carried her over the threshold, a tradition that made her laugh, and set her down gently inside the cabin. He had cleaned everything before they left, and there were fresh wildflowers on the table. The fire was already laid, waiting to be lit. "You planned this," she said, touched by the thoughtfulness. "I wanted our first night as husband and wife to be special." He lit the fire, and warm light filled the cabin. Then he turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable, in a way she had never seen before. "Clara, I have never done this before. Been with a woman, I mean. I want you to know that, so you do not expect someone who knows what he is doing." The admission surprised her, but it also made her love him even more. This strong, capable man was nervous about being with her. "I have not either," she confessed, "so we will figure it out together." He crossed to her and cupped her face in his hands, kissing her with a tenderness that made her melt. They undressed each other slowly, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with careful touches and whispered endearments. Kane was patient and gentle, always asking if she was all right, if she wanted to continue. And when they finally came together, it was awkward and tender and perfect in its imperfection. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the loft, skin against skins, hearts beating in sync. "I love you," Kane murmured into her hair. "I will never stop being grateful that I walked into that saloon that day. I love you too. You saved me, Kane. In every way a person can be saved." "No," he said firmly. "We saved each other. I was just existing before you. Now I am living." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Clara had never felt so safe, so loved, so completely at home. The months that followed were the happiest of Clara's life. She and Kane settled into married life with ease, their partnership deepening with each passing day. The physical intimacy between them grew more natural and passionate as they learned what pleased each other, and Clara discovered that she craved his touch, the feeling of his strong body against hers, the way he whispered her name when they made love. But it was more than just physical. They were partners in every sense. Clara took over full management of the cabin and garden while Kane handled the hunting and trapping. But they also worked together on larger projects, like expanding the chicken coop and starting construction on an addition to the cabin. "We will need more space eventually," Kane said one October morning as they laid the foundation for the new room. "For when children come." Clara's heart swelled at the casual way he spoke of their future, as if it was certain and bright. "You want children? With you?" "Yes, as many as you want to give me." He paused in his work and looked at her seriously. "But only when you are ready. There is no rush." As it turned out, nature had its own timeline. In November, Clara realized her monthly courses had not come for 2 months. She was pregnant. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She was going to be a mother. She and Kane were going to have a child. She told him that evening after supper, unable to keep the secret any longer. "Kane, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the piece of leather he was mending, immediately attentive. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby. For a moment Kane just stared at her. Then he was across the cabin in 2 strides, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby! We are going to have a baby!" "Careful," Clara laughed, even as tears streamed down her face. "You will make me dizzy." He set her down and immediately dropped to his knees, pressing his face against her still flat belly. "Hello, little one. I am your father. I promise I will never let anyone hurt you. I will protect you and your mother with my life." Clara ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with emotion. This was everything she had never dared to dream of: a loving husband, a home, and now a child on the way. The winter passed slowly, with Clara's belly growing steadily. Kane was alternately terrified and overjoyed, constantly worrying about her health and safety. He would not let her do any heavy work, insisting on doing everything himself, which drove Clara crazy even though she appreciated his care. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she protested when he tried to stop her from carrying water from the well. "Indulge me," he said, taking the bucket from her hands. "I cannot grow the baby for you, so let me do everything else." She laughed and kissed him, unable to stay annoyed when he was so earnest in his protectiveness. In March, as the snow was beginning to melt and the first signs of spring were appearing, Clara went into labor. Kane had brought Mrs. Chen from town a week earlier to stay with them, knowing they would need someone experienced to help with the birth. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Kane paced outside the cabin, unable to bear hearing Clara's cries of pain but unwilling to leave the area. Finally, just as the sun was setting on the second day, the sharp cry of a newborn filled the air. Mrs. Chen opened the door, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Ashford, a big, healthy boy." Kane rushed inside to find Clara propped up in the bed, exhausted but glowing, holding a squirming bundle wrapped in blankets. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was red-faced from crying, but to Kane he was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Can I hold him?" "Of course, he is your son." Clara carefully transferred the baby to Kane's arms, and he held the tiny life with extreme care, his large hands cradling the infant with surprising gentleness. "Hello, son," Kane whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I am your father. Welcome to the world." Clara watched her husband bond with their newborn and felt her heart could not possibly hold any more love, yet somehow it did. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had not settled on anything definite. Kane looked at his son, then at Clara. "What about James?" "After your mother, Jane. James is close, and I want him to carry something of her with him." Clara's eyes filled with tears. That Kane would think to honor her mother, whom he had never met, showed the depth of his love and respect for her. "James Ashford. It is perfect." They kept Mrs. Chen for another week while Clara recovered her strength. Kane doted on both his wife and son, barely sleeping as he tried to help with everything. He changed diapers without complaint, walked the floor with James when he fussed at night, and looked at his little family with such open adoration that it made Clara fall in love with him all over again. As spring turned to summer, they settled into life as a family. James was a good baby, healthy and growing quickly. Kane would take him outside and show him the mountains, talking to him about the plants and animals, even though the infant was too young to understand. Clara would watch from the doorway, her heart full. One evening in June, when James was 3 months old and sleeping peacefully in a cradle Kane had built, Clara and Kane sat outside watching the sunset. "Can you believe it has been a year since I bought you away from your father?" Kane asked. "You did not buy me," Clara corrected gently. "You freed me. I suppose I did. Best decision I ever made." Clara leaned against his shoulder, content. "Do you ever regret it? The quiet life you had before? Now you have a wife and baby to worry about, all the responsibilities that come with that." Kane turned and tilted her face up to his expression serious. "Clara, before you I was not living, I was surviving. There is a difference. Yes, I have more responsibilities now, but I also have more joy than I ever thought possible. I have a wife I love beyond measure and a son who is the best parts of both of us. I have a home that feels warm and alive. I regret nothing." She kissed him then, long and deep, trying to pour all her love into the gesture. When they finally pulled apart, Kane smiled that rare, beautiful smile that he seemed to save just for her. "Do you think you might want more children someday?" he asked cautiously. "I know James is still so young, but I would like a big family. If you would, I would like that too. Maybe a daughter next time. Someone to teach to be as strong and brave as her father, and as kind and stubborn as her mother," Kane added, grinning when Clara swatted at him playfully. Life continued in its peaceful rhythm. When James was 6 months old, Kane taught Clara to help him with the trap lines, the baby strapped to her back in a carrier Kane had fashioned. They worked as a team, checking traps and resetting them, with Clara becoming increasingly skilled at reading sign and understanding animal behavior. She discovered she had a knack for tracking, which pleased Kane immensely. By the time James was a year old, walking unsteadily and babbling constantly, Clara was pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect and was not dealing with the stress and malnutrition she had suffered before James's conception. Their daughter was born on a cold January morning in 1878, a quick labor that had Mrs. Chen barely making it in time. The baby girl had Clara's lighter hair and Kane's dark eyes, and she screamed lustily from the moment she entered the world. "She has your temper," Kane teased, holding his daughter while she glared at him with unfocused newborn eyes. "She has your stubbornness," Clara countered, but she was smiling. They named her Catherine after Kane and called her Katie. James, now walking and talking in simple sentences, was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her. Kane built another cradle and expanded the sleeping loft to accommodate their growing family. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Kane's trapping business thrived, and they began to prosper in a modest way. He built a larger barn and bought more animals. Clara's garden expanded to include a small orchard of apple trees. They made friends with other families in the area, hosting occasional gatherings and attending community events in Silver Reef, which was growing rapidly with the discovery of silver deposits nearby. Clara never saw her father again. She heard through town gossip that he had died of liver disease 2 years after her wedding, alone and unmourned. She felt sadness at the waste of his life, but no real grief. He had made his choices and she had moved beyond them. When James was 5 and Katie was 3, Clara became pregnant again. This time she gave birth to twin boys, robust and healthy, whom they named Michael and Thomas. Kane was beside himself with joy at having 4 children, though the work of caring for them all nearly overwhelmed Clara until Kane hired a young woman from town to come help during the day. "I want you to have time to enjoy them, not just work yourself to exhaustion," Kane explained when Clara protested the expense. "We can afford help now and you deserve it." The children grew up strong and happy, loved by both parents and surrounded by the beauty of the mountains. Kane taught all of them, even Katie, to hunt and trap and survive in the wilderness. Clara taught them to read and write, using the Bible and the small collection of books they had accumulated over the years. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kane surprised Clara by taking her on a trip, leaving the children with Mrs. Chen and the hired help. They rode into the high mountains, to a place Kane had discovered years ago but never shown anyone. It was a hidden valley, accessible only through a narrow pass, where a pristine alpine lake reflected the surrounding peaks like a mirror. "I wanted to show you this place," Kane said as they stood on the shore, his arm around her waist. "I found it when I first came to these mountains, and I always thought it was the most beautiful place in the world. But it felt lonely then. Now, sharing it with you, it is perfect." Clara turned in his arms and looked up at the man who had changed her entire life. He was older now, lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, silver threading through his dark hair. But he was still strong, still protective, still the best man she knew. "Do you remember that day in the saloon?" she asked. "When you refused to buy me and told me I owed you nothing? Of course, that was the day my life changed. Mine too. I was so scared and so angry and so hopeless. I thought my life was over. And then you walked in and showed me that there were still good men in the world, that I deserved kindness and respect. You gave me everything, Kane. My freedom, my dignity, my family, my happiness. How do I ever repay that?" He cupped her face in his hands. Those same calloused hands that had offered her help when she needed it most. "You already have. Every day you choose to stay with me, to build this life with me, to love me despite my rough edges and my past, you repay me 1,000 times over. I love you, Clara. I will love you until I take my last breath and beyond." They made love there by the alpine lake, under the wide blue sky, renewing the vows they had made 10 years ago. And when they returned to their cabin and their children, Clara felt more grateful than ever for the series of events that had brought her to this life. The years continued to pass. James grew into a strong young man who loved the mountains as much as his father did, eventually taking over most of the trap lines. Katie became a skilled rider and hunter, stubbornly refusing to be limited by the expectations placed on women. The twins were inseparable, always getting into mischief but with good hearts. When Clara was 40, long past the age when most women stopped having children, she was surprised to discover she was pregnant again. Kane was both delighted and worried, knowing that childbirth became more dangerous as women aged. But Clara was still healthy and strong from years of mountain living, and when she gave birth to another daughter, a tiny, delicate thing they named Rose, both mother and baby came through fine. 5 children, Kane marveled, holding baby Rose while surrounded by his other children, all of whom were delighted with their new sister. "We have made quite a family." "We have," Clara agreed, looking around at the life they had built. Their cabin had been expanded several times and was now a proper house. The children were healthy and happy. She and Kane were still deeply in love, still partners in every sense of the word. As the children grew older and began to make their own paths, Clara and Kane found themselves with more time alone again. They took long rides through the mountains, reminiscing about the early days of their relationship and marveling at how far they had come. Kane was in his 50s now, his hair more silver than brown, but he was still strong and capable. Clara had gray in her hair as well, and her hands were roughened from years of work, but she felt more beautiful than she ever had in her youth, because she was loved completely. One evening, when Rose was 10 years old and the other children were grown and beginning to start families of their own, Clara and Kane sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset. James had built his own cabin nearby and was courting a girl from town. Katie was talking about joining a traveling show that featured skilled riders. The twins were working a claim in the silver mines. Their family was spreading out, but they all remained close. "We did good, did we not?" Kane asked, his hand finding Clara's and lacing their fingers together. "We did better than good. We did wonderful." Clara squeezed his hand. "I never imagined my life could be this full, this happy. That day you took me from that saloon, I thought you were just saving me from a bad situation. But you gave me everything, a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love. You gave me the same, Clara. I was empty before you. You filled all the hollow places inside me." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and orange. Inside the house, Rose was practicing her reading, her young voice stumbling over words. It was a perfect, ordinary moment, the kind that made up a life. Years later, when Clara was 65 and Kane was 68, they celebrated their 43rd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house was full of noise and laughter and love. James had taken over the trapping business entirely and had 3 children of his own. Katie had married a fellow performer and traveled the country, sending letters full of adventures. The twins had struck silver and made a small fortune, which they used to buy a ranch down in the valley. Rose had become a teacher in Silver Reef and was engaged to the doctor's son. As the celebration wound down and their family departed, leaving just Clara and Kane alone in the quiet house, Kane turned to his wife. 43 years, sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like we just met yesterday." "I know what you mean." Clara leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, so familiar after all these years. "Do you ever think about that day? About how things might have been different if you had not been in that saloon?" "I try not to. I cannot imagine my life without you. I do not want to. I think about it sometimes. How close I came to losing everything before I ever had it. If you had not been there, if you had not cared enough to intervene, I would have ended up in such a terrible situation, or maybe I would have died trying to escape it. But you were there, you saved me." Kane shook his head. "We saved each other, remember? I was half alive before you. You brought light into my world." They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms as they had every night for 43 years. And though their bodies were older now, slower and marked by time, their love was as strong and passionate as it had ever been. Kane passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 75, with Clara beside him. She woke that morning to find him gone, his face peaceful and his hand still holding hers. She wept, of course, for the loss of her great love, but she did not despair. They had been blessed with an extraordinary life together, and she carried that with her. She lived for another 7 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, telling stories about their father and grandfather, about the mountain man who had refused to buy a woman, but had instead given her freedom, and, in doing so, had found his own. She spoke of their love, of the life they had built, of the family they had created from nothing but determination and devotion. When Clara died at the age of 77, she was buried next to Kane in a small plot on their property, overlooking the valley they had loved. Their children erected a simple stone marker that read, Kane and Clara Ashford, partners in all things, together forever. And in the hearts of their descendants, the story lived on, passed down through generations, of how a mountain man paid $40 not to buy a woman's servitude but to purchase her freedom, and in doing so found a love that transcended time, circumstance, and every expectation. It was a story of redemption and second chances, of finding light in dark places, and of the transformative power of choosing love over convenience, compassion over cruelty, and partnership over possession. Their love had started in the worst of circumstances and bloomed into something beautiful and lasting, proving that sometimes the greatest loves begin with the simplest act of human decency and grow into something that changes not just two lives, but generations to come.